so excited to have you here today to find and join the Mundane. And I am your host, Aya Nichols. And I'm excited because last week we had my parents on the show where I got to ask them hard questions about my adoption and got to explore just the different details of how I became who I am. And I'm so grateful to my parents that they were willing to share that on the show, but also that they were willing to take this journey on with me, because even though I was looking back on the video that we recorded, it seemed like, oh, they were such a great family. It really wasn't like that at the beginning, to the point where I am shocked that we are like that now. And that only makes me want to praise the Lord even more, because I remember a time where I used to dread seeing my mom and dad because I didn't want to disappoint them again, and they knew that, and we didn't know how to work through it. So it would be this whole big ordeal of me having a panic attack and crying and all of this just for going home for Thanksgiving. It was such a big deal for nothing now that I have matured and built this relationship with them. But back then it was so hard because I haven't had these moments of love and acceptance with them. I had glimmers of it, but I didn't understand them. So I am so grateful for them, and I'm grateful that we have these moments. And I just wanted to tell adopted parents that it could get there one day. And even though it may have taken us almost a decade to get there, and it may take other people, who knows, a decade, 2 decades, which is hard to really think about because that is 10 years, 20 years of being and struggling with someone to finally have the relationship that you've always dreamed of with them. But by God's grace, I have now this relationship with my parents that is beyond all comprehension, because I am so grateful for them. Both me and my sisters are so grateful, each for an individual reason, and that is their story to tell. But I am so happy that they were able to share that story and to share our adoption story, because you were able to see that God was with them in the very beginning, just as He was with me. And that's the funny part. He was both with me and them all at the same time, with me in a different place and with them in a different place. They were just wanting to build a family from the ground up. And I was just wanting a family with a mom and dad. I didn't care if it was the ground up or the top down. It could have come from anywhere. But the fact that God was able to join us together, and though we had our hardships in becoming a family, that it was still so glorifying to Him. Because now that they have adopted me, they gave me this new life, this new path, this new trajectory. If I had stayed in my biological family, I would be a completely different person with a different story. I wouldn't have my husband, I wouldn't have my daughter Mia, and I can't imagine my life without them. So the fact that all of that had to happen, even though it was hard, it happened so that way I can build this new life from the life that He gave me that I didn't want back then. But now, having the life that I do, where I have this amazing, loving husband and this amazing and crazy 2.5-year-old daughter who wakes me up in the middle of the night just so she can get her juice. But at the same time, having my parents to go to during any hardship or weekend or holiday, where they just love on her so much that I can't help but to feel that love in my inner child. And I mean that by whenever I see them loving my daughter, I see how they would have loved me when I was that old. And that has grown my heart and everything else so much, just because I had never had that perspective before. And I may have had to wait a decade and a half for that to happen and for me to see it. I am so grateful to have seen it, because I am now able to build and further my relationship with them because of it. Because I'm no longer seeing them as these people who just took me in. I am now seeing them as these people who have embraced my child as their grandchild and spoil her just as much as any grandparent would, Believe me. So the joy that comes with that has been more satisfying and fulfilling than having my own biological parent, just take its course, because there had to be so much in between that to come to that point. But the fact that it came to this point where it's so sweet, I can only give glory to God, because only God could have created that. If you were to have met us back in high school, and few of the people who are watching, they have, and you guys know what I'm talking about. For me to be now saying this is such an extraordinary thing that I can't help but to feel joy so much about, even just when I think about it. And when I get to go back to DC and visit my parents. And even though I didn't have the relationship that I've always wanted, always dreamed of, that I wanted in high school. Like, I didn't get that high school experience. But now I get whatever experience this is, which is just living life with great parents, great grandparents who will love on me, love on my child, and will continue to be with me for the rest of my life. So really, I don't care if they weren't there with me when I was born, when I was making my first step. Yes, those were important moments. And I will cherish those with my biological parents, with mama, with baba. Those are the people I will cherish those moments and time with. But now I get to cherish other times and other ways with my adopted parents. And I get the best of both worlds, just like how Hannah Montana always said. And I was always obsessed with Hannah Montana because she said the best of both worlds. And I didn't realize that this would be the best of my world, but it is. And I think it's a better life. I think whatever the Lord has planned and accomplished in my life so far is the best that could be. Even though coming here has been so hard and has involved multiple therapists, multiple times of me being instituted in a hospital for months, came with heartache of me leaving my parents in the middle of the night and then me having to go back, apologize, and rebuild that relationship. It's not easy. And it wasn't this great, easy, or joyful, or anything to do at that time. But now that we've done it and survived it and have gone past it, the fruit that it's bared is so sweet that I would rather not have any other fruit than whatever the Lord produced within this turmoil and affliction that happened. And it wasn't just affliction on my part. I mean, yes, but it was also affliction on my mom and dad. I'm biological and adopted side. So, and yet years later now, it's producing such a sweet fruit that is so joyful that I'm still trying to understand how this happened. And God is the only answer I have and that they have. So that is why I love sharing my adopted story and why I'm doing this show, so that way people could see that affliction could bear fruit, and that just because you're going through suffering right now doesn't mean that it's going to last and be suffering forever. That maybe one day through your suffering, because of the thing you are right now suffering through, one day you're gonna find so much joy in it because of seeing how God worked through it. I don't know how He will work through it. I don't know how He will work through any kind of suffering. But seeing how He has worked through mine has been so amazing that I know that He is working through other people, that if only they would withstand and be faithful to Him in whatever is going on. Not that I was necessarily all that faithful, but if they were only to stay by His side, that they one day will reap so much joy. And I say that, and I think of Job whenever he was going through all of his affliction, all of his suffering. He didn't understand for one bit how God could do this to him, just because of how faithful he has been. And he took pride in his faithfulness to God. And in some sense, he was right to. He was so scared of God's affliction, of God taking good things away from him, of bringing catastrophe on him, that he obeyed the law. He would even give sacrifices to his children whenever they went and partied, just in case they would have sinned in that party. That's where he was like. And then for him to have such affliction happen upon him, and that for that to be the glory that God has given him, at the very end of the chapter, the very end of his story, he even fell to the ground, because we can't even imagine how God could take the thing that is hurting us the most and make it the thing that we love and get the most happiness, most fulfillment, most anything joyous from. But I guess that's the kind of God we serve, and that's the kind of God I am sharing and I want to share. So I wanted to go back to the Bible and show you how this has been true since the beginning, since prehistoric times, because I think what's happened back then is still happening now. And if maybe we are to see and understand what happened back then, we can see and understand what's happening in our life now. So back then, in Ephesians, now we're in Ephesians 3, we're talking about how Jesus has now opened up the promise to Gentiles. How now it's not only the Jews that have this promise that God made to Abraham, their father, because they are descendants of him. They are descendants of Abraham. They shared the same blood. So the promise that was made in Genesis that they held on to about God being for them and love them and will make them this nation that is his, they held on to that. Not that they honored it, but they held on to that as this chosen people. And then in Ephesians 3, Paul says that this has been revealed to him, this marvelous plan of God, that now it extends to Gentiles. That now this promise that was made to the Jews, that if they were to stay in the law and do this, that this would be their inheritance. That now the nations that he did not want them interacting with, did not want them marrying, can now be a part of it. That the nations that God condemned throughout the entire Old Testament because of the other gods they worshipped, have the opportunity to come into the promise, into the fold of God. And the Jews didn't necessarily understand it because it has been a promise to them this entire time. And they took pride in it. They took pride in the fact that God had chosen them, but they never fully wholeheartedly worshipped him because of it. They just, I guess, took pride in the covenant. They took pride in just the actions that it took to be a part of it. So like circumcision. So like making sure that you circumcised your son whenever he was born. So that way you celebrated the Passover. So all these things they took pride in, that if they were to do these things, then they are part of the promise. And they are part of the promise because these are the things that were given to Moses, the Jew. But now they weren't given to the Gentiles. Jesus did not give them this covenant to the Gentiles. The only covenant he gave to now the Jews and the Gentiles was to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. That was it. And I think it was really hard for the Jews to accept that as truth. And I think that's why Paul went around and killed so many different Christians before he himself saw the Lord. Because how could God now include the entire nations that he purposely told them not to interact with and not to associate with? How are they now a part of the promise? And the answer is through Jesus. And that was the goal the entire time, was that through Jesus, the whole world would know and love him. Because when the Gentiles were interacting with the Jews, I'm sure they were curious about who the Lord was. But they weren't Jews. They didn't have that kind of access yet. But the Lord always wanted them to have that access, which is why Jesus had to come. And because of him, now, no matter if you were born a Jew, if you were born with Abraham's blood, with his promise, or you were born with some sort of blood from Timbuktu, you have the opportunity to be a part of his family, of his covenant. And he wanted that to be known. He has been showing that throughout the entire Bible all around. And I'm going to show show you because we're going to go back to Job when all the dinosaurs and whatever roamed in Job's time. God said that he has made the earth and he has ruled the thunder. He has controlled everything to the point where Job 37 verse 5, when his voice resounds, he holds nothing back. God's voice thunders in marvelous ways. He does great things beyond our understanding. He says to the snow, fall on the earth, and to the rain shower, be a mighty downpour, so that everyone he has made may know his work. And it continues going past, and it talks about how even the animals know who God is, because they know who's controlling the earth, who's controlling the rain, the thunder. That is something built within them. And I believe it's something built within us as well, that over time we have lost connection with, because, now we've become more advanced. Now we understand more medicine, and now science has now taken over more things, which I fully believe in science. And I thank God for science because he has made it. Science only proves God more and more and more. And I have seen that happen throughout my lifetime on this planet, because back when I first became a Christian, there was this whole evolution theory that now 15 years later has been discredited. And now we are saying, well, humans couldn't have evolved from the sea. There's no type of evolution that has proven that one species can become another species. We can become another type of our species. Like a bird can become another type of bird, but a bird never became a fish, or a fish never became a bird just because of the circumstances it was in. And we see that in human beings, where we couldn't have just come from fish to gorillas to now human beings, because we were made in his image. So we were made to glorify and know him. And he wants to be known by us. That's why the whole earth shows who he is. That's why the person from Timbuktu can know who God is by just looking up at the stars. Because then they can see that there is someone bigger than everything that they see on earth. And every time we try to give credit that to aliens or something else, we take credit away from God, because that was his creation. And that is how we know him. So not only did he want to be known, he wanted to be chosen by us just how he has chosen us for him. And the fact that he chose us for him is so crazy. Us, the people who are so frivolous with our love and are so unworthy of anything he has to offer, considering he's made us and everything else. Like, why would he even want our love? But it's because the maker wants the clay to be known that it was made by the maker. And for the clay to know its maker is such a gift. For us to know that our God, the one that formed us in our womb, knows us by name and wants to have a daily relationship with him. Not just a relationship like believe in him, which obviously he does. But I'm talking about wanting to have this daily walk where your heart belongs to him type of relationship. Because when he made us, when he made you, when he made me, all he was thinking about at that moment was me. When he was fashioning my body, when he was fashioning the color of my hair, the color of my eyes, he was thinking all about me and what Aya would look like. And he does that for every human being. He does that when he makes every person. So yeah, the maker wants his clay to love him. And that makes sense to me. And now in Ephesians 3, Paul is saying that this revelation has been shown to him. That now Gentiles are a part of the promise. That they are brought into the fold of God. And he continues on to talk about how the Jews and the Gentiles becoming one, as one nation, as one body, even though they're now from separate blood, just like how I'm a separate blood from my parents. We have now become one body. Mia shares no blood with her grandparents. As far as Amy and Dave, she has no blood relation with them, but she is part of their family, because it was because of them that she was even born. And I think that is the kind of relationship that Paul is talking about, where God takes two different bloodlines and makes them one and makes them one new family. At the very end of Ephesians 3, he says that he hopes and prays that the Ephesus church would take hope, confidence, and courage in the fact that God is for them and is for the nation he is creating, and that despite our lack of understanding, because we're human, that he knows better, and that through him, he is including all of his children, everyone he's called to, no matter if Abraham's blood runs through your veins or not. If you have Jesus in your heart, then you are part of the family. And that is the significance he is trying to make, is that he doesn't care whose blood you have in your veins, as long as if you have Jesus running through it, you are part of God's family, point blank. And he hopes that we can take strength and confidence and live our life in that and gain our strength from knowing that he is for us, that we are his. And I wonder every day what it would be like that the church would take its confidence and know that it's through Jesus' strength that we are able to keep going, that we are able to love others, that through Jesus' love and strength, we are able to withstand and be in the midst of darkness. Because the church doesn't want to be in darkness. And that's really hard, because we want to be a part of the light. We are the light people, but we are a light for the darkness. And if we refuse to be around it, then how can we show or shine anything? If you're just a light shining to other lights, then you're just a bright light, which is amazing. But if you are the light in the darkest place, no matter how dark that place can get, you will still shine and you will still be a light. And I think that brings people more fulfillment than just being a light in a bunch of other lights, like how they are in the church, where you just stay with your church friends, you just stay with your church family, and you're just a light among lights. But we are a light that was made for darkness, for the dark world, so that the people who were made for light can come out of darkness and join us and then become light themselves. So by us withholding that from them, because of us fearing affliction, fearing trouble, we stay in our comfort zone. We never shine our light on the people who need that on. So Paul says, take heart and take courage, because my suffering at the very end is for you. That he is in prison for you, and he finds joy in being in prison, because he knows, because he is suffering, other people will see God through it. And that is his joy. He sits in prison while he's sitting there starving, being afflicted, that other people are gonna know God and are now accepting him and seeing him. And that brings him joy in the midst of all of it. So yeah, he's definitely more than willing to go through it. And he ends his prayer in Ephesians 3 saying that this affliction is for their glory. And he was more than happy to take it. So I wonder what would it be like if more Christians were willing to accept more affliction and more trouble in their life for the sake of their brothers and sisters who are living in darkness. And that's it for today. We will continue next week. We will go into chapter 4, where we talk about having unity in the body, where how we bring in the Gentiles and the Jews together, how this two conflicting body is ever going to become one to now name the church. And I'm excited to see what God has to say. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next week. Bye.